Government Gay, Alex Reynolds series. Book 1. Writer Fred Hunter, St. Martin's Press, New York, 1997. Narrator Eric Arst. Dedicated for Joan Edwards, who told me so. Chapter 6. I spent a mostly sleepless night mulling over whether or not to call Mr. Martin and fill him in on the happenings since his visit. I felt like one of those cartoon characters from the 50s that have a little angel appear on one shoulder and a little devil on the other, whispering opposing viewpoints in the poor idiot's ears. The little devil told me that not wanting to get enmeshed in an increasingly murky government problem was smart and nobody would blame me. On the other hand, so the little angel whispered, it is one's duties to do what's right, and it's right to get involved when you may have important information. However, whispered the devil innocently, I didn't have any pertinent information. The angel countered with the fact that we'd been followed and our house had been broken into, and if that didn't seem pertinent, it was at least significant. I couldn't help interjecting at this point that, like it or not, we were already involved. After all, it's my head, and I do get to have my say. I don't think I fell asleep until around 5 o'clock. At least, that is what the clock read the last time I looked at it, but I had made a decision. To say that I woke the next morning would be highly overstating the case. It was more like I slogged my way into the mire of semi-consciousness when I finally realized that further sleep was hopeless. I pulled my tatty baby blue bathrobe over my naked frame and trudged down the stairs, leaving Peter sleeping peacefully. I don't know how I looked, but I definitely felt like something the cat had coughed up. I found my mother seated in the kitchen table, clad in a red kimono with gold dragons embroidered around the ends of the sleeves. She was eating toast and lime marmalade and looking disgustingly luminous for 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. What are you doing up so early? She said, swallowing a bite of toast and reaching for her teacup. I could ask you the same thing. She cocked an eyebrow at me and said, I don't mean to sound dire, darling, but you don't look like you should be up yet. I poured myself a cup from the teapot and joined her at the table. I didn't sleep well. I heard, was something on your mind? There is something dangerously deadpan about the way my mother says things at times. Even though we've been together all my life, I still don't always know when she's joking. I decided to let it slide. I was trying to decide whether or not to call Mr. Martin and tell him what's happening here. I can't see that it would get him any further along in finding what he's looking for, but I can't see that it'd hurt either. Did you come to any conclusion? Yeah, like it or not, it's my duty. Mother set her cup down and stared into it as if she expected an answer to float up through the tea, like answers used to float up in an 8-ball. Toy we had when I was a kid, when you turned it upside down. I wish things were that simple now. I think you're right, said Mother at last. We don't know him, but he is with the government, and he did ask us to keep him informed. Her tone of voice, coupled with this solemn look on her face, told me that this was one of those occasions when she agreed, but wished she didn't. But won't you have to wait till tomorrow? I don't know. I somehow think that somebody will answer at the CIA, don't you? She shrugged and took another bite of toast. Nothing affects Mother's appetite. But at least I'll wait till after breakfast. I thought maybe a little food would reaffirm my decision. I had a bowl of cereal, 2 pieces of toast, a hard-boiled egg, a banana, and a can of Coke. While scanning what was left of the Sunday paper we'd brought the day before, all the while mentally trying to avoid the matter at hand. When 9 o'clock rolled around, I retrieved the piece of paper on which Martin had written his number, dialed it, and waited. While the phone rang, I fleetingly wondered whether the CIA had an answering machine and if anyone in their right mind would leave a recorded message there. Then it crossed my mind that they recorded all their calls anyway. That wasn't a comforting thought either. The phone was answered with one word. Yes. Mr. Martin? Yes. This is Alex Reynolds. Yes. Some things have happened since you were here yesterday, and I thought you should know about them. Go on. I went through the whole story from our being followed by the clay person and how we eluded him, to our coming home and finding the house ransacked. When I told him about the house, he interrupted with, "Did you report it to the police?" "No," I said, and I hoped that I didn't sound guilty. After all, we didn't actually report it to the police, we reported it to Frank. Which isn't the same thing, and I didn't want to get this guy on Frank's case, because in movies and books, there's always tension between the feds and the locals. I went on to tell Martin that I'd gone back to Charlene's last night, though I didn't tell him that we were sleuthing, and that I'd run into the young man, Jerry something, who seemed to have been beaten up for some reason, though why or by whom I didn't know. Martin made noises that seemed to indicate that he thought what had happened to Jerry was superfluous, which I found annoying because it gave me this sneaking suspicion that Martin thought people of our kind were often beat up, as a matter of course. When I got to the end of my story and what we thought of everything that had happened, there was a long pause during which I thought I could feel Martin being irritated with me. Though why he should be, I couldn't say. At least he said, "Mr. Reynolds, in light of recent events, I need to ask you once again if you are sure that Victor Haycheck didn't give you anything or say anything to you that would indicate what information he was carrying." "No," I said with exasperation. I was getting really tired of answering that question. "But I do know one thing, which is Victor Haycheck is dead. It was in the paper yesterday." There was a silence of the kind that inspires paranoia in the hearts of many Americans before he said, "Yes, I know. I wanted to ask when he found out or why he hadn't told me, but I knew he wouldn't answer, so I didn't bother." There was another pause, then Martin said in a voice that sounded ominously pleasant, "Well, if you're sure that Martin said nothing and gave you nothing, then it would appear that the matter died with him." "He didn't," I replied, then added, "What about the people who ransacked our house? Are we in any danger here?" There was a slight hesitation which made my heart beat faster before he said matter-of-factly, "I don't think so. They probably realize by now that they've made a mistake. They probably won't bother you again, but please contact me if they do." "Now wait a minute," I said hotly. I was certainly in no position to accept his assurances as lightly as he seemed to give them. "And," he said, cutting me off, "I can let it be generally known that you have nothing to offer." There was something about the way he'd said it that made me feel certain he could do this, and that realization gave me a sort of sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. "Won't you guys ever know what it was all about?" There was the briefest silence and the sound of a deep breath, and he said, "Mr. Reynolds, we appreciate all of the assistance you've given us in this matter." And with that, the phone went dead. I have to admit that I felt let down. As scary as the past day or so had been, it was exhilarating. One doesn't often find oneself doing Hitchcock on location without a script, but it was over, and our respective lives would now go on, and I found myself fighting a wave of disappointment. I mean, sure, we'd been in danger. I'd fled for my life along with Mother. I'd eluded a foreign agent, and we'd found our home invaded, but as Mother would say, it made for a change. And within another moment, I found myself not only fighting disappointment, but resisting an increasing concern that I was becoming seriously unhinged. After all, how in the hell do you form an emotional attachment to having your life in jeopardy? I suspected that that was not normal. I turned the television on and stared at it, oblivious to what was being shown. Well, not totally oblivious, since they were showing an old Sherlock Holmes movie with Basil Rathbone, but after an hour of it, I suddenly realized that I didn't know which one they were showing. But I knew we had it on tape. You know you're in bad shape when you spend an hour in a semi-comatose state in front of your television set watching a movie that's interrupted every 10 minutes with 5 minutes of commercials, even though you have an unedited, uninterrupted copy of it in your entertainment center. I had a sudden nostalgic pain when I thought of our movies having been tossed all over the floor the day before, as if I already longed for the days when we were chased by thugs. Sunday is one of Peter's days off, and when he's off, he has a habit of sleeping in. It's another one of those talents he has that I begrudge him, since I simply cannot sleep if the sun is out. I can't even sleep if the sun is supposed to be out. The movie ended at 11 o'clock, and I went up to our room and found him lolling in bed. I would have been really irritated with his failure to get up to console me were it not for the fact that he looked so cute when he lolls. It didn't matter that he didn't know yet that the case was over, though I have to admit, I had that fleeting irrational thought that if he really loved me, he would know. Anyway, he was rousing when I came in. He somehow saw me furrowed brow through his half-closed sleepy eyes, and I sat on the side of the bed and related the details of my conversation with Martin. When I finished, he ran his hand along my forearm and said softly, "Oh, I'm sorry. That is why we have been together for so long. He understands." The positive effects of Peter's condolences didn't last me very long. I was in a blue funk most of the day. To quell my disappointment, Peter suggested that we have lunch at an outdoor cafe. An outdoor cafe in Chicago consists of a normal restaurant throwing some tables and chairs out on the sidewalk in the way of pedestrians and the exhaust fumes of buses. But it is romantic. After lunch, we whiled away the afternoon pursuing what appeared to be the most popular pastime for gays on a hot Sunday, browsing through the Marshall fields. Nobody followed us. Nobody chased us. Nobody so much as looked at us furtively over the top of a newspaper. We got home just before 6, and as we approached the front door, I had the slight hope that we'd find the house ransacked again, and so find that our part in the little drama was not over. But my hopes were dashed. The minute we opened the door, everything was anticlimactically in place. I think that despite my protestations to the contrary, I liked being involved and would have enjoyed unraveling a foreign plot that had eluded the usual government agencies. It's not as if I was entertaining a vision of suddenly becoming America's first special agent in light loafers, but then neither was Cary Grant when he was mistaken for an agent in North by Northwest. It occurred to me for the first time how Grant must have felt when the movie was over. I mean, what his character felt after all the excitement of chasing agents across the United States and winning the affections of Eva Marie Saint. What kind of life would they be going back to? Would she give up the life of a seductive secret agent to make him oatmeal in the morning? And what about Cary? Wouldn't returning to the life of an advertising executive seem rather futile after foiling a foreign plot? I didn't think I could ever look at that movie the same way after this. As I lay in bed that night with Peter softly and rhythmically whistling through his nose, I realized that this was the kind of irritating trend of thought that succeeds in keeping one awake all night. I suppose I must have dozed off at some point during the night because I found myself waking at 6:45 the next morning. Peter had stopped his whistling and his breathing was so low I actually leaned over and put my ear close to his face to make sure he really was breathing. He smacked his lips a couple of times and rolled over to his side. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling for a few more minutes, and thus decided that trying to sleep any more would hardly do me any good. After all, the sun was up, so for the second morning in a row, I crawled out of bed, more dead than alive, to face the day. Only today, the only interesting prospect I had was to go back to work on that damn fucking boring corporate flyer. I quietly moved to the closet and removed my wicker hamper, which I brought downstairs and set next to the kitchen table. We keep the washer and dryer in the small utility room off the kitchen. Monday morning is when I do my laundry. It makes me feel like I'm starting the week off fresh. Mother wasn't up yet, but I knew she would be soon. Monday morning is also the time when she usually cleans house. She could afford a cleaning woman, but like most of the British, she's not afraid of hard work. And I don't think anyone else could get the house up to her code anyway. Doing it herself saves her aggravation. I grabbed a can of Coke from the refrigerator, popped it open, and took a long drink. Then I set up the table, flipped open the hamper, and started sorting clothes. I threw pants in one pile, shirts, underwear, and socks in another. I shy away from white underwear and white socks, which do nothing more for me than create an extra load. I sighed wearily at the amount of clothes I had to wash. I took the pile of pants into the utility room and dropped them on the floor. Then I opened the washer and poured a scoop of detergent from the box we kept handy and set the dial to normal. I then started to arrange the pants tastefully around the agitator. When I got to the black denim pants I'd worn to the bar on Friday night, I pushed them into the washer, which was filling with water, and in doing so, happened to touch the left pocket. To my surprise, it felt like something was in there. I was puzzled because, being right-handed, I almost never stick anything in my left pocket. I pulled the pants out of the washer, their legs, which had already gotten wet, slapping against my bare calves, and stuck my hand in the pocket. What was there felt like cardboard of some sort. I pulled the object out, and when I saw what it was, I let the pants slip to the floor, and I almost followed them. All the strength seemed to have gone out of my legs. There in my hand was a matchbook with a glossy red cover, the matches with which Victor Haycheck had lit my cigarette. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.